Hello everyone, Tess Thomas here from Clay County Historical and Arts Council. I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of Let's Go to Jail. Today we are with Sara Smith, who's going to give us a history of the feed sack. So, Miss Sara, thank you so much for coming and being with us today.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
Wonder if you just jump right in and talked about when you got here to Clay County and how this all started.
Well, of course I grew up in Clay County, and when I retired I moved back here in '98 and immediately got involved with the Arts Council because my aunt was the founder of it.
Miss Gertrude Price?
Miss Gertrude, and so that was only natural that I'll carry on the family tradition and be involved.
Sure.
So in the early 2000s, well, they had always had exhibits in these two cases, and every year it would change to something else.
Okay.
And I was given the task along with Jane Snowden, who was an elderly resident that lived here, and she had collections of everything in her house.
Oh, wow.
So it was easy for us to draw from her collections for these two cases.
Oh, wonderful.
And one summer she said, well, next year we need to think about feed sacks. And I thought of these old white feed sacks, and I thought, well, nobody would be interested in them, they're just white feed sacks. But then I remembered the more colorful ones that actually in the 40s and 50s I was very familiar with. So I began to get excited about the exhibit then.
So when you say feed sacks, you're talking about the actual sacks that feed came in for farmers to feed their whatever they have, their livestock.
Right.
Okay.
And in the 1950s and maybe into the 60s, I wasn't here very long then, the chicken farmer it was very prominent to raise hundreds of chickens, and the feed would be delivered on trucks, or people could go to the store and select their sacks. And so that's when feed sacks became popular in this area. I relate it to the chicken feed, but actually it could be a lot of different things that came in the sacks.
Okay. And so you decided that the next exhibit was going to be feed sacks.
Yes, and I had to do it by myself because due to health reasons, Jane was not able to do that. I didn't have any feed sacks nor anything made of feed sacks. So of course I went to the internet and started researching the history of the feed sack, and then started, got on eBay and different websites to buy feed sacks. And the more I bought and the more I read, the more interested I became, because there was a lot more to it than I had thought about.
That's amazing. So you did quite a bit of research then.
I did
and
quite
purchasing a bunch. And then
yes.
when you finally started receiving the feed sacks, then where'd you go from there?
Well, it was just putting them together, and part of it, which I'll talk about in just a minute, and I wanted to have things that had been made with feed sacks.
Right.
So I had to be very careful about buying feed sacks. A few people had feed sacks and would give me one or two, but most of the time it was that their grandmother or their mother or someone had left this trunk full of feed sacks, and they really didn't want to part with them.
Sure.
And I couldn't blame them.
Can't
I understood why.
Yeah. So I noticed that you're saying that you created a lot of these things here.
I did.
Out of the feed sacks in the style of the original year or whatever decade that they came out. Is that
yes, I ordered just like the feed sacks. I ordered a few things I thought were feed sacks. I soon learned that everything wasn't, because at that particular time, a lot of people were quilting and using fabrics that were printed in the style of feed sacks.
I see. So it wasn't necessarily authentic.
It wasn't
feed sack.
authentic. And
Okay.
I learned how to tell the difference we have a sack over there that it partly has the thread. They were sewn in with a coarse thread. And if you could see the holes where the threads were, you knew it was a feed sack.
I see. Because the coarser thread left a bigger hole, and
It
you
left
still
a
have
bigger
to see
hole.
it. That makes sense.
And I did the same thing by ordering a few items of clothing that said they had been made from feed sacks. When I received them, I realized that they hadn't been. So I said, if I'm going to put it in the museum and say that it's made of feed sacks, then I have to be sure that it is.
Authentic, correct.
It's authentic.
Right. Thank you for your detail. I love that. If you're so adamant about it being authentic.
Well, I made the first exhibit. It was a little smaller than this, just the two cases. And at the end of the summer, it was just supposed to be a summer exhibit, and then you change every year. So at the end of that summer, I took up the exhibit, and we put in something else. I think maybe jewelry or something the next summer. And people came back, and they said, "Where are the feed sacks?"
Oh.
I brought my friend to see the feed sacks.
Oh, that's great. It was quite a draw then for visitors.
It was.
Wonderful.
So then I was asked to put the exhibit back up, and I wanted to enlarge it, make more to it, and make sure that it was, good enough to be here and
As a full time.
At full time.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's wonderful. What we're going to do is take a second and kind of regroup the furniture out of the way, and Sarah is going to show us pretty much the whole progression through the whole display you see behind us. So you'll be able to see a lot of different items on the exhibits at the feed sack. So stay tuned. Sarah, I understand that our feed sack exhibit has been featured in a local magazine. Could you tell us about that?
All right. In 2011, I think. You may be familiar with Our State magazine, which features things all across North Carolina. And they called wanting to know if we knew anything about a feed sack exhibit. So, of course, I told them all about it. And they came, interviewed me, and made pictures. And this, as you can see, is a picture from there.
Yes.
But they said not many people had feed sacks or were familiar with feed sacks, so they wanted to feature an article on it.
That's wonderful. Well, if you would, Sarah, can you just give us a brief history of the feed sacks?
All right. Up until the 1800s, goods were packed in wooden crates or barrels and things like that, which made it difficult to be shipped across country, and sometimes they leaked and so on. But in the 1800s, they were able to weave cloth, so they wove a lot of cotton cloth and found out that if they turned it into bags, that it was much easier to handle. And then everything started coming in bags, these in white bags, and they would be stamped with the logo or the company. And not only animal feed, but sugar and flour and everything.
Oh,
and
right.
So many things came in bags that President Theodore Roosevelt had to set standards for bags, because if people were buying a bag of flour, they needed to know that it was a certain size, how much they were getting. So it had to contain so many pounds. So they were using all kinds of feed sacks, and then the housewife suddenly realized that she had all of these white bags, all this fabric. What could she do with it?
Right.
So she made tablecloths, towels, sheets. I'm sure she made some clothes, probably shirts and blouses, but it kind of became a humorous thing that she made underwear out of it, and sometimes people would have their underwear and it would have words stamped on it, and it was just a humorous thing for them to talk about. And this was permanent ink, and they couldn't get it out. And in my collecting, I found some things that I thought was very interesting. These are napkins or placemats they still have the black ink
Oh,
on
right.
them, but that didn't seem to bother the housewife. She wanted to make it prettier by crocheting edging on
How
it.
pretty, yes.
And I just thought that was something interesting.
That's awesome. So they definitely, in those days, certainly did not waste things like they do today.
They
You know,
did.
nothing was disposable. Everything had another use that could be used for. So they were frugal.
They definitely were.
Yes.
And when the companies realized what the housewives were doing, they realized that they had a market there.
Right.
So around the 1930s, they started making feed sacks. The very first ones were solid, and instead of having the company's name in black permanent ink, it had a paper label on it, and they could soak this and be able to take the label off. And then when they took the thread out of the feed sack, which was very easy to do, you just had to get it started at the right thread and pull it. They saved the thread, and this might be what they used to crochet with.
Well, that's smart because it would still match. Yeah.
It would still match.
Nice.
They didn't throw away.
Very
anything.
thrifty.
When they started printing, I said the solids came first, then the checkered things, and then of course it didn't take them long to realize that this was a competition to see who could make the prettiest and most desirable feed sacks.
Oh, nice.
So it really took off, and with all kinds of designs, which I just collected, and finally I got so carried away with collecting feed sacks that I just had to fold many of them and put in the corners so that you could see them.
See the little different patterns, yeah.
Right. You can kind of see a progression of time. This one has little green airplanes and cars and things that remind me of the 50s, I would think.
Right.
Cowboys.
That's adorable.
That's the 40s and 50s, maybe, when the westerns were so popular.
Right.
And I'm sure little boys would like to have a pair of pajamas or a little shirt
Sure.
with the cowboys.
I'll make sure to get photos of all of these folks so you can see them up close.
Even Disney. Here's Disney characters: Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck.
Oh, nice.
And this one is just little children playing on it. And the figured ones, the ones that had people on them, were more expensive for collectors now.
I see.
They would be more expensive than just the flowers.
But like that Mickey Mouse Donald Duck's feed sack actually came with feed in it or flour in it or some type of...
This is actually still, it is still a sack. It has never been taken apart.
Nice.
So it
Very
came
authentic.
With, I'm not sure what kind of, maybe
Right.
pet food. I don't know.
Could have been, right. I noticed in this cute dress on the top corner, what does that say, 100 pounds?
100 pounds net, scratch feed, and it has a picture of a little chicken.
So cute.
So they
That's
just
adorable.
used what they had and made it, the design fit the dress, and it turned out to be a cute dress.
Perfect. Can you talk a little bit about the dolls? I see a couple dolls up there.
Yes, this one is an older doll, and I did order this off eBay or somewhere, but they have taken and made the head and then drawn the eyes and things to get the face,
Oh, nice.
and then made a little dress.
That's
to go with
adorable.
it.
How cute. That little girl up in the corner looks like she's got some curls on top of her head.
She has, and she has it's mainly her head, and her face has been embroidered with 2 buttons, and then her gown is a feed set.
And her gown is a feed sack.
Yes.
What's her hair made of? Yarn?
Yarn.
Oh, that's so. But
thread.
I mean,
No,
they
this
were
is
so
yarn.
smart.
Mm-hmm.
I'm amazed. All right, and then looking on the bottom shelf, or the second to the bottom, I see some thread and buttons and.
Well, these are in here because they go with the time period.
Okay.
And people, your grandmothers probably had jars of buttons.
Absolutely.
Because they would have saved every button.
That's right.
That came off of scrap of material.
And that looks like there's even a clothespin bag there on the bottom shelf.
And that's made out of a feed sack.
How wonderful that they could think of this. It's very creative.
Anything that could be made out of a fabric.
Right.
Would make it.
Right.
I wanted to have some clothes made out of feed sacks. Again, I learned a lesson. I bought some clothes online that were supposed to be made out of feed sacks. They weren't. So I knew I had to make them myself. So.
Very talented lady. You made that dress?
I made this dress. I made all of the. Well, I made this. And that one. They're made out of feed sacks. And I had to order patterns also at the same time.
Oh, wonderful.
You couldn't just cut out a dress.
Sure.
You had to have a pattern.
Sure.
So patterns from the same era, getting that 40s and 50s style. And so I made this dress. It took, I'm not sure, 3 or 4 bags.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'll mention at this point, women, when they started collecting bags and they needed so many bags to make something, then they would, to get that same kind of bag, they might go to the feed store and go through and look and say, I want that bag of feed. Or when the truck came to deliver the feed, they would pick out what they needed. And they would just wash their bags, take the thread out, wash them, fold them up, and then they might be able to swap with their neighbors.
I see.
To get as many bags as they needed for a certain design.
Wow.
To make some clothes or something else.
And I can see them trying not to make the same pattern that the neighbor
That
had.
the neighbor had.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
didn't want to go out in the same feed sack dress.
Sure, of course not.
Have.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, let's move over to the center here.
Yes, most of these are floral patterns, which I think are beautiful. Some of them I really think would make beautiful dresses. And they are feed
The
sacks.
detail is amazing.
The detail, the coloring, the iris is one of those.
Oh, pretty.
It's very pretty. This one has little boys and girls figures on it.
Cute.
So, to a collector, it's more valuable
Oh, right.
than just the floral print.
I see. They liked it when they had actual people.
When they had people on them, or any of these that I mentioned in that shelf. This is a pillow that the cover is made of a feed sack, and it tells the story of the 3 little pigs.
Oh, you're kidding.
And I was just wondering, before I came over here today, if feed sacks were still being collected. So I got on eBay, and would you know that I found a feed sack just like this, except it had a different color background.
Okay. What did they want for it price-wise?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I looked, but I don't remember.
Well, I imagine any collection is an investment, but this collection you've got here is just amazing.
This is
the variety.
This is a quilt that my mother made.
Hold on.
And I think one of the interesting things about quilts, if it's made out of feed sacks, people can go back. I remember that design. I had a pair of pajamas.
Right.
Like that.
So it's very nostalgic.
Yes, and my sister and I were looking. I said, I remember my mother having a dress out of that.
Oh, so wonderful memories.
It is.
Yes.
This is just a little doll whose outfit, she's made out of a different fabric, but her clothing
It's a feed sack.
is
Adorable. She's even got a little kerchief on. So cute.
This little booklet, I'll just mention this now. companies, and this is put out by, I think, the National Cotton Association. They put out booklets encouraging the housewife to make things out of feed sacks. This tells her and shows her all the things she can make, what the
amazing.
dresses would look like, and that, of course, helped spur the feed sack industry.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. Let's move around the corner here a little bit. I'm going to pause here.
In this cabinet, we just have examples of different feed sacks, of things that could be made from feed sacks. One thing that's not the feed sacks is just Blue Ridge dinnerware that was made in Erwin, Tennessee, at the very same time that feed sacks were being made. It's hand painted, and every piece turns out a little differently, but it was also something that was cheap, that the housewife could collect, and sometimes she might buy a bag of oats or something, and in it she might find a piece of Blue Ridge dinnerware.
Really?
But it's just all connected.
They would put the dinnerware in the feed sack.
Sometimes, in some things, they would put dinnerware in it, and if they bought that, they would have a piece of china.
That would be nice. What a nice surprise.
This just represents some of the things that can be made of feed sacks. This is a bonnet, which not many people would have been wearing in the 1940s and 50s, but when I think of my grandmother, I think
Absolutely.
if she needed a bonnet working outside, she would have worn one. These are examples of feed sack designs that I have, that are in some of the books that I have.
Okay.
They actually have these feed sacks.
I like that rooster one. That'd be cute for kitchen curtains or something.
There's two of the rooster. And this just shows you how creative they were. These are curtains. And remember, the feed sack is only a certain width or length. And the windows were much longer than that. So they would sew the feed sacks together, and then they put a little ruffle on them
pretty.
to hide the seam where they had to sew them together.
Great thinking.
This is another thing they did. They printed feed sacks with animal prints on them, and you could cut them out and this, I have the actual feed sack and the booklet that shows the feed sack. And it has the directions on it, where you would cut out the doll or the stuffed animal and sew the pieces together, and then you would stuff it, and you would come up with a doll or a stuffed animal.
Look how adorable.
I love the precious little cowgirl.
Oh, she's cute.
And that's the way she was made.
They were so talented and creative. I can't believe they thought of all this. I see some cute threads on that next shelf and a couple of dresses.
Yes, this is a kind of a cape made out of feed sacks. This is a nice small child's dress.
Look at how adorable.
Books that they had printed, Bag Magic. Again, it shows them everything that they need to do to make things out of feed sacks. And this is just something that I, of course, found in an antique store with the wooden spools and the thread still on them.
That's
that
fantastic.
Relates to the sewing in that time period. This, again, is a little girl doll that's stamped. She's stamped front and back. And again, she's in another book that I found.
Boy, the feed companies really got into that marketing. That's amazing. I bet you that upped their sales quite a bit.
I bet it did because, they could cut that out. And the little girl, I think if I unfolded that, she probably even has, well, she does. She has a dress that goes on.
So the doll and the dress for the doll on the same
Mhm.
feed sack.
Yeah,
How wonderfully ingenious.
and even a little bib. To
Oh,
put
you're
around her
kidding.
neck.
That's so cute. I'll get better pictures. I know you guys can't quite see where she's at.
Some feed sacks were made with a design at the bottom. This is a feed sack that has not been taken apart. And these could be used for curtains. Sew some together and you have a curtain for that, or for this type here, or for towels or anything.
Sure, yeah.
But they pillowcases. This is a pillowcase that's made out of it. Now, like this particular one here, that could be a curtain, or you could use it lengthwise and make a pillowcase out of it.
Awesome.
Down here, I just have kind of more feed sacks so that people can get just a glimpse of what some of the designs were. Rick-rack, buttons, wooden
Clothespins.
clothespins like
Nice,
this,
yeah.
just to go back to the time
For that time period.
Right.
Wonderful.
And here, just another way to display more feed sacks.
I'm just amazed at the variety of patterns. That's amazing.
This
Look
one
how pretty.
reminds me of Christmas.
Yes,
It's
me
not
as well.
Really, I don't think a poinsettia, but
But the coloring will certainly work, yes.
Could go with Christmas.
Explain to us about this dress here.
All right. This dress belonged to my cousin, and the story is that in 1950s she was supposed to have to be in a centennial program back in Indiana, and she and her mother came down to Hayesville to visit our mutual grandmother for that summer. And so what they were going to make her a dress while she was here so that she could be in that pageant.
And what time period was the style?
The style goes back to, says the 1850s through the 1860s.
Okay.
It belonged to they had a dress. My grandmother had a dress that belonged to our great-great-grandmother, who had lived from 1816 to 1876.
Amazing.
So they used that as a pattern.
Oh.
But the material they had, they wouldn't want to go to town to spend money on buying material, but my grandmother had plenty of feed sacks. So,
Wonderful.
using that old dress, they made this out of feed sacks. So, when my cousin was visiting Hayesville a few years ago and visited the exhibits, she wrote to me and said, and explained this dress, would I like to have it? And I said yes.
Absolutely.
And I felt that it kind of draws this side of the textile room together with the other side, which you'll be seeing at a later time,
Yes, thank you.
with looms and spinning wheels and so on from the 1800s. When people visit the museum and visit this textile room, if they look at the feed sacks, I think there are two types of people that this appeals to. First would be the older generation, like myself, that grew up in the 40s and 50s and maybe early 60s, and they can remember feed sacks. And since they quit making them in the 50s and early 60s, they are not being made anymore and they don't see them. So they're interested in seeing this exhibit because they say, oh, I remember feed sacks. And then there are younger people that come in and you say, these are all feed sacks. And they look at them and then some of them still don't believe, you mean feed came in that pretty floral sack?
Right.
They did not realize that these even existed.
Sarah, thank you so much for sharing this exhibit with us. I think a lot of people are going to find it very interesting. Our museum hours through Labor Day are Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Molly, our museum docent and historical interpreter, will be here to give you a tour. As Sarah mentioned earlier, stay tuned because we are going to do another interview with Sara Smith at a later date for the entire textile room and give you some history behind that and the loom and the spinning wheel. There's a lot of neat stuff in here. A very little Singer sewing machine. So stay tuned for that. If you or anyone you know has a link to this old gem museum, please don't hesitate to email me at cchac.hayesville@outlook.com, and we'll go to jail together. And you can tell us the history of your family in the Old Jail Museum. Our website is www.clayhistoryanc.org. And I thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next one.